Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Hello and welcome to EPD Australasia's 2021 webinar series. Today's webinar is on digitalisation and the future of EPDs. The last 12 months have seen a significant shift and increase in a demand to digital data sets. And today we welcome Sebastiaan Stiller, CEO of EPD International, to talk about how EPD International is responding to this demand. And then we will hear from our very own Chairman, Stephen Mitchell of EPD Australasia, to bring us back to the local context in Australia and New Zealand. So the format of today's webinar is we're going to hear from Sebastiaan first. Welcome, Sebastiaan. Sebastiaan is the CEO of EPD International and is going to talk to us today about the shift to digitalisation or digitisation, which we're trying to understand how these two work together. Welcome, Sebastiaan.
Yes, good morning, good day from Sweden. Do you want me to start, or do you have a slide yourself?
Thank you, Sebastiaan. If you want to go ahead and share your screen, that would be wonderful.
Yes, I would love to. Thank you. So then I will start sharing. Can you please confirm that you see my screen, Kelly?
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, so good day from Sweden here. My name is Sebastiaan Stiller. I'm the Managing Director of EPD International, who is the owner, the manager of the International EPD system. The International EPD system is, as you may know, the worldwide first EPD program and operational EPD program that was founded in Sweden in 1997 as the Swedish EPD system. And it was a joint engagement between the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency, so the public sector, with the private sector industry. Then the system evolved throughout the years, and then in 2014, the state made a decision that the program shall shift ownership, where the ownership was transferred into a company called EPD International AB, which is today a fully owned subsidiary to the not-for-profit organization IVL, Swedish Environmental Product Research Institute. As that, the company currently offers registration and publication services for environmental product declarations, according to, let's say, predominantly the ISO standards, but also because of the maturing market here in Europe, according to specific EN, so SEN standards, which of course always link to the respective ISO standards to be a global program. So the system evolving, also the partners evolving, because we have a lot of fantastic partners working on the same system with us, including, of course, EPD Australasia. So I'm very happy to be here today with you, Kelly and Stephen, to talk about our system. But as you can see, the system is represented on all continents except Antarctica. And I always have a bit of a joke here, but we have not received any requests from penguins coming from Antarctica. But otherwise, so far, so good. We have EPDs from more than almost 50 countries in our system as it is speaking today. Today, I was asked also to talk about two trends relevant for the future of the EPDs. One of them is actually market regulation turning into legal compliance, especially here in the Nordics and in the rest of Europe, where the regulator is getting more and more active, also in actually requesting information in the sense of show me the proof. Another driver in actually making this possible, because that also means that we're moving, I would say, from a voluntary space, a niche market, into a market space. We would like to use the automation and the digitization opportunities that we see today to work together on a digital future, so that actually that we can have the performance data sets that are coming from the EPDs also ready and prepared for decision making. What I also will share quickly with you is then how EPD International responds to this, and I call them here the change facilitators that we have put into place, or actually putting into place, to actually make this whole thing scalable. But maybe just taking you back one step is, right, must be a general understanding that actually, if we're working towards a solution on climate change, that we just cannot exclude industry. So you have a lot of political activism also here in Europe, where they say like, hey, I'm going to work on some kind of concept, put it in front of the industry, and then actually we have it solved. The approach that EPD International is following is more that we include industry, because industry is actually proactively working towards different kinds of goals. I would say also very ambitious goals, for example, like the science-based targets, which is a hefty exercise if you really want to comply with that kind of system, for example. So we see that the private sector is already acting, not only with pioneers, but we're getting into a majority of companies starting to look into this. So we see two level playing fields occurring on the global scale, but also on the national side, where we're thinking about public sector working on the green economy, especially in Europe, to actually make sure that there's a fair market competition and to avoid, of course, greenwashing exercises. The private sector, of course, is very interested in this level playing field also, to actually know what the standards are for environmental management, conformity assessments, due diligence, but also for climate mitigation purposes. So here, and this is also where I think the EPD is an interesting tool, very important tool, a communication format, that the industry, private industry, has to understand and also know how to transparently communicate the impact of their products with comparable, objective, and ideally third-party verified data to actually make them credible. What that means, why this is important, is because what we clearly see now that there's a shift towards, like we said, legal compliance, because the manufacturers need to start doing their homework so that they are prepared for future compliance, so that they can respond to the questions that will come to them. I think a milestone here was, for example, the Dutch court, where actually told Shell, but also Exxon and a few others, that they have to work harder on meeting the global objectives that we're working towards. We also have the European Union with a lot of upcoming regulations and directives that is not only important for the domestic companies here in Europe, but also those that want to be in the European market, so as an importer-exporter towards the European Union. Think about the European Green Deal, but also about the carbon border adjustment mechanisms, the CBAM, but also the EU levels, which is a new framework for sustainable buildings from the construction sector. We have a new directive also coming into place for corporate due diligence, which previously was only about human rights, but now also includes climate change. And last but not least, of course, we have the PEF, the Product Environmental Footprint from the European Commission, which is still ongoing. And we have the European CE mark, so Conformité Européenne, without this tag that this mark you cannot be in the European market. Well, they're also looking into the opportunity to add environmental impact indicators into this particular CE mark. But there's also a lot of national activism, I would say, not only in Europe. We also see an act coming into place, most probably referring to EPDs, but also in Indonesia. And to give you an example on the national compliance examples here, I would like to share with you the Swedish case, where I would say the Swedish Housing Authority will have a new requirement, for example, on level building LCAs for all buildings that come into the market from 2022. You need to have the climate declaration. Just to make this very clear, this is a type 2, so a self-declaration, but they're promoting EPDs, so a bonus malus system. So you can make use of generic data sets that are provided by this particular authority, but you get credits for having specific, product-specific information in your climate declaration. So in that sense, they're promoting indirectly also the use of EPDs. What is our response? So I think one of the things that we should understand is that this will result in a massive increase of EPDs coming to market in the very near future. We also see this growth in our own system. And we want to make use, of course, of the whole digitization opportunities and the tools that are out there to actually make this not only sensible, but also simple and affordable. Because in the end, we want any organization, no matter its size, location, and industry, having the right to publish EPDs at fair cost and having a high quality document. So what we did, or what we're actually doing, is actually in 2021, we really started looking into our own business imperative. And we started shifting more from looking at the provider of the information, also into the user of the EPD data. We really put these at the heart of what we're doing, because we see that these EPD data from you as a manufacturer are increasingly used also in different kinds of softwares for planning, etc., etc. I will have a slide on that one in a minute. So this is also to mention here, we're doing this in non-exclusive partnerships, and this is not referring to EPD Australasia as a licensee to a system. Here, of course, we have an exclusivity for Australia, but when we talk about tools and about databases that are making use of the data. We also invested, and we brought into the market early 2021, a so-called cloud-based EPD portal, which we're continuously developing and evolving into a tool, an instrument for fully automated EPD development and publication of EPDs currently in the PDF, but also in the digitized data sets that come automatically once you have the information from your system actually entered into the tool. So here also supporting your digitization strategies of the future. And we work a lot here with APIs, not only to the pre-verified tools or to the tools that are developed producing the EPDs, but as I also said, towards the software solutions and databases that are making use of this. We also updated our general program instructions because this whole digitalization has had an effect on how we deal with different EPDs. A critical one, an important one to understand is that in the future we can only handle, because of the digitalization strategies, one data set per EPD. In the past, it was possible to have many products, so product data sets in one EPD, also to reduce cost. Now we have to separate them in order to make them manageable by the software solutions working with these EPDs. Important to understand here is that we also then added a chapter on so-called pre-verified tools, which also makes the whole process of verification and EPD development much more affordable, because you can reuse an LCA model more than just once when you come from the original setup that you developed one specific LCA model for one EPD. This also resulted in an update of our pricing strategy and plan at EPD International, and our partners, and also we responded to that. But in essence, it means that we want to incentivize also companies, and also we don't, because we are driven by an NPO, so this is not for profit, also to make use of the multitude of the opportunities that we're offering via these tools. So actually the updated pricing strategy and plan is incentivizing the publication of many EPDs. A next step that we're also looking into, so when you have an EPD in our system, but you also would like to go to the next step, for example, because you're going into a public tender and you need a modification to this tool, to this EPD, that you also can have a so-called daughter or a twin at marginal cost, that you also can modify the data so that you actually can go into a very specific tender with EPD without having to do a whole new EPD over and over again. So here we're looking into means for you as an EPD owner to reduce the cost and become more flexible also in handling your EPDs. And I think this is important to mention, because what we're working towards is really here understanding that the EPD is a pool of third-party verified data that find use in different applications, but also scenarios that make use of these possibilities that we have when you want to compare environmental performance between products in the same product category. So as that, we're also supporting open EPD research projects that we're looking into circular public procurement. We have done testing in product design and environmental monitoring here in a particular case in the UK, French partnership on a large infrastructure project, using a DCO approach. We are looking for alignment with the ISO 14067 to actually also comply with the new EU taxonomy in green for financial instruments. And of course, also artificial intelligence, with specifically machine learning as one of the disciplines to actually make use of this kind of algorithms also for verification purposes making. So here also having a contribution supporting the verifiers in their work. I think this slide is also, I could talk about that half an hour, but I have only a couple of minutes left. So what I would like to share here is in essence the flow, the data flow from manufacturer to the data user. So when we start on the left side, we see the company working with an LCA consultant, willing to have an EPD. So in the past, it was typical that you just sit down on an Excel sheet or something, you develop the LCA model, and then somehow they popped out an EPD, just to put it very plain. Now, actually, we start looking into also this so-called pre-verified EPD tools, which basically says that once you have the LCA model, you can lock the model, and then you start working with the input parameters from the manufacturing process, reducing a lot of the work that has to be done all over again, because it's already verified as a system. So you're reducing here the verification cost only to the input parameters of your manufacturing process. In the European Union, but also in the US, we are in Europe, we're discussing fully automated EPD tools, but in the US, they're also practicing fully automated EPD tools, which is a slightly different approach, which will make in the future single EPD verification superfluous, because it's another way of dealing with the software programs. Here, at least we as EPD International are looking into the definitions on the terms of making use of such tools, whereas we see that currently there's already making use of for concrete tools, for example, in Europe, in the US. Where we then look at the middle part, which is the EPD system, also with our colleagues, we're also looking into updating actually our own impact categories. Of course, there's a lot of activity going on. So we're looking into, are we working with outdated? What do we update? Why do we have to include, for example, a circularity impact indicator in the future or not? But we're also working with so-called identifiers, because we are really willing to link your environmental product information with other databases where it's more about product quality or density or strength or something of a product for decision making. So actually, when you're taking the case of a concrete, specific concrete, that you not only see the environmental performance of it, but also if this concrete can carry 10 levels of a building or not. So is it strong enough, or does it have other product qualities that you need to include in a decision? And then when we look at the right side, so also here connected with an API, we're looking into different reporting formats. And currently in Europe, where we're set with that, is the ISO EPD Plus format that we're using, which is run and evolved by the INDATA. But we're also looking in alignment with the Open EPD format that is predominantly used in the US by the EC3 tool, for example. And last but not least, there will also be a new ISO terms, ISO standards coming into play, where, for example, the ISO 22057 is really looking into building information modeling and then making use of EPDs in these kind of softwares. So here, ideally, also not only working in our own formats, but also like how do we communicate with so that the different softwares of the future or the current ones actually can make use of the information that is actually in the EPD. Kelly, how many minutes do I have left?
1 minute, Sebastiaan.
1 minute, great. So then I was also like, I can share this slide deck if you want, but I warmly invite you also to look into environdeck.com, the website of EPD International, where there is a link to the EPD portal, where you can actually sign up for free. But I also would like to mention, if you're planning to publish an EPD in the near future, please also contact Kelly from the Australasian system, because she will handle your EPDs from Australia and New Zealand until we also have made this system available for your particular territory. So we're rolling this out to our partners globally, also with their terms in the future. But currently, please refer to Kelly if you have any questions. But we, of course, warmly invite you, if you want to test around, have a look at it already, what the future will be, to actually look into environdeck.com and sign up for free. I think this is it from my side, and I don't want to stretch my time. Thank you, Kelly, and looking forward to Stephen's contribution.
Thank you so much, Sebastiaan. That was a lot of information in a very short period of time, so thank you very much. To everyone that's attending, just to let you know that the full webinar will be recorded and available online afterwards. So if there was any information, those slides you want to look at again, it will be there if you go to our website, epd-australasia.com. We will also have plenty of time at the end for questions, question and answer. I see a couple of questions have popped up already, but we're going to save them until after Steve's presentation. So now I welcome Stephen Mitchell. He is the Chair of EPD Australasia. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Kelly. Can you see my presentation there?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. And thank you, Sebastian, for getting up so early. I know that the sun rises early in Sweden at this time of year, so it's not too much hardship. So thank you, but thank you. And thank you everyone for coming this afternoon in Australia and New Zealand. So I'll just cover a bit about who EPD Australasia is for those who aren't familiar with the organisation. We're a joint venture of the Australian and New Zealand Life Cycle Assessment Associations, a regional partner of the International EPD system, which is why we've been joined by Sebastian from Sweden today, and we really highly value that partnership. So we're a service for registration and publication of EPDs to ISO 14025, and for construction products, EN 15804, and for the latest version of EN 15804, the EPDs also comply with ISO 21930. So just a reminder about what an EPD is. Our EPDs provide comparable environmental product performance data over at least the production phase of the life cycle. Now, a lot of what I'll talk about today is focused on construction and building materials, because that's the most number of drivers we've got in Australia and New Zealand, but it's important to know that they apply for products across a whole range of sectors. And importantly, that data is independently verified and globally recognised through that our relationship with International EPD system. So all our EPDs that get registered with us also get uploaded to EPD International, and that has global visibility with them and our partners in the system. So an EPD importantly demonstrates a supplier's commitment to sustainability and transparency. Okay. So a few stats about our system at the moment. We've got 44 EPD owners, 85 EPDs registered with us at the moment from a range of companies, small, medium, and very large companies. And there's literally data for hundreds of products within these EPDs. I don't think we've done a count, have we, Kelly? But we should get around to that one day. And why digitisation? Well, it's a product of success, I've got to say. There's been, as Sebastian outlined, there's been a great take-up and recognition of EPDs across the world. European EPD system has been going for more than 10 years. We've been going for about 5 years. And not only that success from the take-up of EPDs, but there's increasing demand for the data that they represent. So they're finding their ways into building and construction decisions. They're finding their way into third-party databases, into tools, into procurement guidelines for organisations and government, and increasingly now, as Sebastian pointed out, into regulation. And that's starting to explain the serious take-up of EPDs. But there's also an increasing demand for EPDs from suppliers of building and construction products, and suppliers wanting to reduce the cost of producing and registering EPDs. And those two dynamics, they're hugely increasing the volume of data that's available. And that brings its own challenges. The digitisation of different industries, not just the building and construction sectors, is driving this demand as well. So in Australia, we have a number of systems which are mainly focused on the building and construction sector, but also other industries. For example, in New Zealand and Australia, we've got the Green Star, LCA credits and embodied energy targets. We've got MECLA, which is driving a demand-driven tool for focusing on embodied carbon solely. And embodied carbon reduction targets are definitely driving it for at an organisational level for many infrastructure and building companies. And that is also facilitated by Infrastructure Sustainability Council's tool. The New South Wales government have a Building for Climate Change initiative draft regulation that will probably find its way into regulation, if not this year, probably next year. But we also got a range of tools such as eTool, LCD, Building Transparency, EC3 embodied carbon tool is finding its use in Australia. The minerals, food, packaging sectors are all moving towards product information digitalisation, and customers are asking for more product-specific data. So they're all driving that. And this is a slide that I always use to say how EPDs are being used. You've got a whole range of EPDs there. So you've got the building project manager who might want a Green Star or an ISCA rating, and they collate that information, they compare, and they theoretically do a whole of life cycle assessment of the building and assess the impacts and make their decision. Obviously, there are other factors besides environmental data, strength, performance data, etc. But this is how it is being used by many companies. But that presents its challenges when we've got this huge growth in building and construction EPDs. This is just the EPDs that are compliant with EN 15804. That tracks the history over the last 10 years. So you can sort of see it's starting to become, we're all familiar with exponential growth these days in the days of COVID graphs. Well, this appears to be what's happening with EPDs. It's starting to go off the charts. And you can also see, by the way, the number of EPD programs that are in Europe. We've got one main EPD program here in Australia and New Zealand, but there's a plethora of EPD programs around the world. But the common link for these construction EPDs is EN 15804 and also ISO 21930 as well, which you've seen a huge growth in the number of EPDs complying with that standard. So that number of EPDs is you're starting to see now for a project builder. That presents real challenges. Okay, how do you process that information? And there's our own databases, Eco Platform as well, which is a joint European initiative for all EPD programs in Europe, and we're part of that as EPD Australasia. You've got the building assessment tools such as eTool, Sphera's Gabi, CimaPro, EC3. They're doing some of that impact assessment, some of it just on a single issue, some of them multi-issue, which we prefer. So you can sort of see the huge challenge, the numbers of EPDs and the amount of data that needs to be processed. I just dropped this particular slide in here to give a bit of context for us as well. We sort of operate on a nest of standards, which people struggle with as well, trying to recognise how they all fit in. But I think this one slide sort of illustrates pretty well the nest of standards that EPDs have to comply with. You'll see there the general program instructions and the latest iteration of those, version 4, that kicks in as a mandatory feature from October 22, which is driving our single product EPD data set. We also have a regional annex to the GPIs, the EPD Australasia. So all EPDs have to fit in with those, as well as and that overall ISO 14025 standard. So when it comes to single data sets, which is what is driving this change, each product from October 2022, each product variation must be treated as an individual EPD data set. You've got to group you'll have to group the results. Is still allowed. However, the environmental impact can't be greater than 10%. So the data results for each product must be registered separately, i.e. you will have to have its own EPD registration number. Now, it will still be possible to have a PDF EPD. It's just that the data sets themselves will have to have their own EPD number. And they'll have to be available digitally as well. So I'm just going to use a few examples here from our library of EPDs registered here in Australasia. One for Colorbond, one for softwood timber, and one for wholesome ready-mix concrete. So here we have EPD for BlueScope, which basically lists the environmental results for 2 sizes of Colorbond steel, covering 1 square metre. So each of these will have to have its own separate data set. In the case of softwood, we've got 2 products here, main products, but we also have a variety of preservative treated products. So each of those products will have to have their own EPD data set and EPD product number. For concrete, I'm not going to lie to you, it's going to be really challenging because there's a lot of products, for example, in this EPD for each state, for each product mix. So it definitely is going to be challenging for that sector and the digitising that sort of data. But I just wanted to point out that our prices have changed since April. People don't have to do this single product data set for some time. However, we've changed our prices to align with what the international EPD system pricing is. And you can sort of see there that the price per registration of it per EPD is coming down a hell of a lot. So we're recognising that the individual data set for products, the prices will come down quite a bit. So we'll be keeping a close eye on these to ensure that they're aligning with international EPD and conducting research to make sure that the transition is smooth. Just quickly a bit about EPD data sets, formats themselves. The three data formats that Sebastian talked about. There's a bit of information here on each of those data formats. Eco platform, which all our EPDs get uploaded to the Eco portal of the European Eco Platform Network. Open EPD format, that's a EC3 or Building Transparency are advocating that open EPD format where that's currently being piloted with UL, a major US EPD provider. And that standard that Sebastian talked about there as well. So these EPD formats are something we're examining at the moment. We haven't got all the answers about how they're going to transition to these digital data formats. But when I was preparing this presentation, I've come to the realization, well, our EPDs registered with us are being digitised as we speak, or they're already being digitised. They're already being entered in tools such as eTool, LCD. That's a user initiated process. They can make that publicly available within the eTool. That needs to be validated by eTool itself. Some of the data in some EPDs is also being entered manually from PDFs into the ISCA materials calculator, and also being incorporated in LCA tools such as Garvey, SemaPro, and OpenLCA. So the message I suppose I wanted to take home for people to take home is that digitisation's here. We're working on what is the best format. So stay tuned. And if you're developing EPDs, think about your product data sets. So with that, I'll open up for some questions, I think, Kelly.
Great, thank you so much, Steve. I think you really talked well about some of the practical implications of the changes we're looking at. So thank you for that. I'm sure many of our participants will have found that information very useful. Okay. So if you do have any questions now, if you can please just type those into the Q&A section in the webinar, or you can pop them into the chat. There are 2 questions up already. So the first one is from Rob Ruette, who is incidentally a member of our technical advisory group as well at EPD Australasia. So Rob has said, right to publish EPDs in a sensible, simple and affordable. The digital format of one data set per EPD doesn't always facilitate this. In some cases, it will lead to a less sensible approach, i.e. to save costs. Happy to elaborate and would like to hear Sebastian's thoughts.
Yes, thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Rob. I can agree that there's always exemptions that we can't cover, but we are part of an ecosystem ourselves, as I think Stephen impressively showed as well, by a plethora of EPD program operators and also, of course, the users of EPD. And I think important here is that if we want to make use of the information in an EPD, we have to link it, the data set. So it's not perfect, but the system is evolving. Hopefully that also when we reach out to companies, I think Stephen mentioned the concrete sector, with having thousands, or in the US already 30,000 of EPDs for specific mixtures, ready mixtures available. That we're also there looking into different solutions, which I mentioned, for example, so the fully automated EPD tools that are being practiced in the US. So we will see new solutions coming to market, also trying to cover those specific cases when you're talking about thousands of EPDs. The market for EPDs currently is in a transition phase where we see still SMEs willing to have 1, 2, 3 EPDs, making use of it in optimal cost. They want to use a tool like ELCD or like the one-click LCA from Finland, etc. So we're working towards actually, but in the end, of course, you can't pick them up all, but the system is evolving in that sense. So like I think Stephen Mitchell, stay tuned. I can only but support that comment. We'll see that. And we're working hard to making it as sensible and affordable as possible. That's the commitment. So, but we're not there yet. So.
Thanks, Sebastiaan. Did you have any comment on that, Steve?
No, I think Sebastiaan's covered that one pretty well.
Okay, great. So we've got another question here. Is the one data set per EPD a necessary change? Manufacturers could continue to produce EPDs that cover multiple data sets while also providing data for each data set in a format that allows for digitalisation. Difficult word to say.
Yes, it goes a little bit into the comments, of course, from Rob, but currently it is set up, and this is how actually in the EPD program operators world, we were quite unique that we allowed from the beginning multiple data sets in one EPD. Other EPD systems didn't even allow that from the very beginning. So we now basically have to change because obviously we need to comply with the ecosystem itself, because this is how the rest of the world wants to make use of the data. And I guess this is also important to understand that the EPD, we want to have the PDF format linked to the actually digital data set. But maybe this is another way of looking at it. Like we said also, we see solutions coming to market like the mother-daughter concept, where we will look into this opportunity as well, that you have a generic EPD, an average EPD, for example, and then you can work with the mother-twin principle. Here, I can say that we're currently setting up the definitions and also the terms of this principle. We have invited the Australasian technical committee also to comment on the definitions that we would like to use here to actually make it possible. So that when you're talking about thousands of EPDs, that you actually also can work with that in a more sensible way. But yes, I mean, we are part of an ecosystem, and we can't just always define how we think it's best. We have to comply. It's a joint effort, I would say, of the whole industry and the program operators to make this work.
Yeah, and Sebastiaan, I'd just like to add to that. That's exactly it. We're part of an ecosystem of. My initial reaction when I saw the proposed changes to the general program instructions was, oh no, how can we hold back this tide?
I know.
Yeah, we've had a few meetings about that, but the discussions I've had with EC3, I think we've had some discussions with EC3 and seeing how the data is used, had some discussions with eTool here in Australia, and the sheer volume of data that's being produced by EPDs is impressive. But the whole reason for producing this data is so people can make better decisions to reduce the environmental impact of their products and whether they be buildings or minerals or inputs to other products, and that's driving the decision making here. So what we're trying to align it with how users are using this information and find it most useful. And people are making assumptions at the moment. Like I said, they're uploading the PDFs into the data, and sometimes they do it right, sometimes they do it wrong. So I see part of this digitalisation process is working with like credible systems and tools to ensure that the information is being used properly and credibly to make better decisions.
Great, thank you, Sebastian and Steve, on that. We have another question from Richard Haynes. Richard says, we've recently been involved with the Eco Platform pilot in the EU. I was wondering if you could comment on the alignment or in particular deviations in the three main formats you've highlighted: Eco Platform in data, EC3 and ISO EPD in BIM.
Well, I can maybe from my side, Kelly, I can say that of course we are not only talking to EC3 in the eco platform setup, but also individually. I think here we're working hard already with EC3, for example, on finding alignment. We did a mapping exercise to see where the deviations are. I would say Open LCE, Open EPD has a couple of good opportunities also for us to complement or evolve the ISO EPD Plus format with additional information for decision making. The ISO EPD in BIM we're also following in a research project. So here we're looking into this, but this is still an evolving. So here I can't comment too much on specifics because we're just part of a research process here. But I think it looks fairly okay between the EC3 and the in-data opportunities that we see. We have a flexible tool, so we can also make this in the future, this EC3 requirements voluntarily in our EPD portal, so that you can include it if you wish for a digitized format of your EPD. So yeah, I think that's in short. I can't say too much detail about it because we are still in a mapping exercise here ourselves. So.
When is that due to be finalised, Sebastian? That mapping exercise?
I don't know from the Eco Platform because I'm not in the board and not in the working group itself. But I expect that they have clarity at least this year on that one. So that's but the Eco Platform is what is it, 20-25 partners working together. So there's a lot of alignment and discussion, of course, also here. It's not that we see. I see that there will be programs going ahead where others will have to implement a bit later. So yeah.
So yeah, just an answer to that question, maybe. We haven't got all the answers here, to be honest with you. It's really, as Sebastian's saying, we've got a mapping exercise. We're having our own discussions with companies like EC3 and eTool, and I was to be honest, I was pretty impressed with EC3 and their Open EPD format, but I'm not a techie. So it'd be interesting to see what comes out of that mapping exercise. So we haven't got all the answers here, but we've got a working group on this at EPD Australasia to get people at a level of understanding, and then to develop our methodologies and advice to our clients. So going forward, that's where we're at. But happy to answer any questions offline about this as well if people have concerns, and provide some feedback for us as well.
Great. Unfortunately, we have run out of time today, but I do want to again thank Sebastian and Steve for your time. If there are further, I know there's a few questions there that we just haven't had time to answer, but I'm more than happy for those to be sent through to me, and I can follow up and get those answered for you. But as Steve has said, it is a bit of a work in progress, and it's something that not only EPD International, as Sebastian has said, is still working on. It's something here at EPD Australasia that we're still getting our heads around, and we don't have all the answers at this stage, but we hope to certainly be communicating more on the transition in the next few months. So thank you all for coming, and as I said, the whole presentation and webinar will be available on our website shortly after this concludes. Thank you.
Thanks Kelly. Thanks, Sebastian.
Thank you very much, Kelly and Stephen.